On today's Tech Help for Churches, Stitcher for podcasts. Hi everyone, and welcome again to another episode of Tech Help for Churches. My name is Paul Allen Clifford. I'm your host today, as every Monday. This show records live at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. UTC when we're in Standard Time, 3 p.m. during Daylight Savings Time. And I would like you to join the conversation. So drop me a line, paul@trinitydigitalmedia.com, or I'm on Twitter, Paul Allen Cliff. Let me spell that for you. PAULALANCLIF. And you can interact with me there. If you'd prefer to go old school and talk to me on the telephone, I do have a toll-free number for you. So let me give you that. That's 1-877-763-3246. That's 1-877-POD-ECHO, if that helps you to remember to echo back to this podcast. So let's talk about Stitcher. First, by the way, if you're watching this on YouTube, there's a little subscribe button. If you could just do me a solid and click on that button and subscribe to this, then you'll get notifications every time that I upload another one of these videos, and it's free, so you can't beat that price. Okay, so let's get started talking about Stitcher. So the 400-pound gorilla in the room, the elephant in the room also, is iTunes. iTunes is what you want to make sure that all your podcasts are on. My third podcast, the Eternity Changers podcast, isn't yet on iTunes. I was hoping to build a little buzz and maybe see if I could maybe squeak into new and notable. So we'll see if we can do that, because that would really help with the audience numbers, and I really care about having more and more of you guys out there in the audience watching, because I'm convinced there's a lot of people that would be interested if they knew about this, but they're not, because they don't know. So that's probably your number one step in publicity, is submitting your feed to iTunes. Probably your number two that not a lot of people know about is Stitcher. Now, while 60 some odd % of all podcasts are listened to somehow in connection with iTunes, even if you're not listening to it directly in iTunes or downloading and syncing with an iPod, but you're downloading on an iPhone or an iPod Touch or even an iPad, you're using iTunes. So 60 some odd % of the people, and that's from our friends over at Blubrry, Blubrry, the second largest podcast media host, who's along with Libsyn, the two that I recommend the most highly. They say 60 some odd % of people are going through iTunes. 20 some odd % of people, so the rest of the vast majority of people, are going through Stitcher. Now, let me tell you what Stitcher is. Stitcher is, in some ways, an iTunes competitor in that it allows you to get podcasts. But it only does podcasts, so it doesn't compete on the music side of things with Stitcher. So people that go there tend to be interested in podcasts. But it has an additional feature that most podcasting doesn't normally offer, and that is streaming. So when you subscribe to shows on Stitcher, you can download them, that's fine. But you could also, let's say you're out of shows that are downloaded and you want to listen to something and you noticed, hey, there's a new episode of This Week in Tech. Oh, I'll have to download it and then I can listen to it. Not so with Stitcher. You can start listening to it right there. It will stream directly to your device. So in a lot of ways, this gives podcasters parity with regular terrestrial radio and satellite radio. This is really, really cool. And something else you should know is a lot of newer cars with their electronics packages are coming with Stitcher bundled in. So instead of hitting the little radio app on the screen, you can hit the Stitcher app and start listening to me or Leo Laporte or someone somewhere in the middle. And that is really, really impressive to me. So that's one reason that you would use Stitcher, is the streaming capability. The second is they have smartphone apps for both iPhone and Android. So again, you're talking about 90-some odd % of the smartphones out there in circulation they have an app for. Now, I can't remember whether they have one for Windows Phone. It's quite possible that they do in fact have one for Windows Phone, and if they don't, that would be the next one that they'd be working on. So the vast majority of people will be able to listen to your podcast on Stitcher. Something you might be concerned about is you might be concerned that you wouldn't get good stats. And that used to be the case, because the way that they would do it is they would download a copy onto their servers, and that one copy would be the one that they would stream or download to other people's devices. So that could be problematic. Well, they've been working with Blueberry and Libsyn and a few others to basically share how many downloads your podcast gets, and then that translates into the stats package that you're using. So if you're using the free stats from Blueberry, which are available in PowerPress, for WordPress, then even if like one person subscribes to your feed, but a billion people subscribe on Stitcher, it would show 1,000,001 people downloaded your show, and that's very valuable. Because the old way, it would show 2. And 2 and 1,000,000 are slightly different. Just slightly, just a bit, just a little. So that's something else for you to know. I've mentioned that it's second to iTunes. Now, there is a downside to Stitcher, and it's actually the same downside that iTunes has. Unlike Google, you will not automatically be found. Since you won't automatically be found, you need to proactively create an account and tell them, hey, I have this podcast. Normally, that's no problem. Tech Help for Churches is in Stitcher, so you can get that. For some reason, they haven't added Technobabble to Stitcher. Now, I don't know why that is. Maybe I need to do a search, because it's been around long enough that maybe when they initially launched, they added it in. So that's why they're not giving me any indication that they've added in Technobabble. And I haven't told them about Eternity Changers yet. So those are the two places I need to tell about Eternity Changers. There are other lists out there. There are other places. But, if you think of where you put your effort as an 80-20 proposition, that you will get 80% of results from 20% of the effort, and the remaining 20% of the results from the remaining 80% of the effort, you can go around and you can find every single podcast listing and submit to that. That's your 80%, and you're going to get about 20% feedback from that, because almost no one uses those. But if you spend 20% of your time submitting to iTunes and Stitcher, you're going to get 80% of the results. So those are the first places you look for. Now, if you're bored, you have some time, then by all means, add to the Zune Marketplace, add to a lot of these other places. But start there. Start with those two places, and then branch out from there. So basically, Stitcher is the up-and-comer. They're the the new place that a lot of people are going. And they're part of the resurgence of podcasting. Not that podcasting ever went away, but it's starting to peak again. It was up and to the left. This is my left, so I guess for you it would be up and to the left. If you're looking at the video, I'm moving my hands up and to the left. So podcasting has always been up and to the left. Now it's starting to spike up and to the left even more. And that's because of smartphones and tablets and other devices that are always connected, including now cars. So we'll see more and more people interacting with your content if you do that. Now remember, a sermon is a good starting point, but don't stop there. Every church puts their sermon up, and so there's nothing to differentiate yourself, your church, your ministry from others. So what I would do is I would have a conversation with the pastor, parenting tips with the children's pastor, how to deal with troubled teenagers with the youth pastor, things like that that can spread out your brand, to use kind of secular jargon, that can spread out the message to people that wouldn't normally engage with it. And I think that with use of tools like Stitcher, as well as iTunes, you'll find that you get more and more people. I should mention one other thing. This wasn't in my notes, but when you're putting links on your website, which you absolutely should do, because a lot of people will find your podcast through your website. When you're putting links on your website for your shows, make sure you put in an iTunes link, a Stitcher link, and just a generic RSS link. This is something that a lot of people fail to remember to do, and probably that's the third on the list of ways that people subscribe, is just through generic RSS2. So RSS 2.0 with enclosures. So you do that, and almost no one will not be able to access your content that way. They can go to your website and listen or watch. They can subscribe through RSS and listen or watch. They can go to Stitcher and listen or watch, or most of them will go to iTunes to listen or watch, directly or indirectly. So that way you'll get pretty much everyone, and you can save all your effort of listing in other directories for the, hey, what else can I do time, which you may not have, but if you do, that's great. So next week we're going to talk about iTunes, the 400-pound gorilla, and talk about why you absolutely need to be on there, other than the fact that it's the one that most people use. So until next time, I want you to take a hold of this information. Go ahead, submit your podcast to these places, and get the message out. And together, we'll go out and change eternity. This is Paul Allen Clifford with TrinityDigitalMedia.com.